Been a while. Probably 5 years since I put out my last video. I'm here to issue out a very important prophecy for the future. No, I'm just kidding. I don't have any prophecies for you. I do want to muse a little bit about the current situation, what got us here, and then a little bit about the future. But mostly, I'm just kind of bored today, and I felt like making a video. So here we go. Now, we're going to remember COVID-19 or the coronavirus outbreak probably for the rest of our lives, even if we aren't infected with it, or even if we don't know anyone that has personally perished from this disease. We're going to remember it probably because there's going to have long-lasting economic repercussions, and also it's really an absurd thing what is going on if you stop to think about it, that literally the entire world is stopping to hunker down because of this invisible quote-unquote enemy that is ravishing our communities, causing people to get sick and flood hospitals at rapid rates. It's quite frightening. It's pretty creepy. It's bizarre. Like, we don't have any real frame of reference for this in our current lifetimes. I mean, there was the SARS outbreak in China and I believe South Korea, but we haven't had anything like this in the West. And it was bound to happen at some point. Like a pandemic is more likely to occur than probably a nuclear attack, and yet we, as a civilization, have constructed billions of dollars worth of weaponry, fighter jets, nuclear bombs, but we seem to be pretty flat-footed with this pandemic. Like, it's a bit of a joke that we don't have stockpiles of masks and stuff like that. Like, I could see maybe if the hospitals don't have them, but why wouldn't the government, have a contingency plan, especially considering their obsession with the war on terror, which biological terrorism is a very real threat to the United States. I get my balls fondled when I walk through the TSA at the airport, but then the government doesn't have stockpiles of, N95 masks. That seems a little bit crazy. And so it's just sort of a reminder of the ineptitude of our government. And not just our government, but the bureaucratic bodies like the World Health Organization and the CDC. Prior to this, I always thought the CDC was actually pretty competent, but now I don't believe it is. So it's really just a reminder for individuals to sort of take care of themselves, because Big Daddy government isn't going to save you. That's up to you. You're the first line of defense for your own sustenance and survival. So where were you when you first heard about the coronavirus? I can give you my story, and I'll tell you the steps that I took and what I thought of it, and maybe you'll reflect back on what you thought of it, and maybe you were just a flu bro type, because the media had in the past used a lot of fear tactics, and it's arguable that they're still using fear tactics on this, but at least in the very beginning, they did not really follow the story at all. They were covering the Trump impeachment circus instead. And this is even CNN, which their coverage of this has actually been better than Fox News, but they were nowhere to be seen when this stuff was happening in China initially. So I first heard about this on 4chan, which is, if you've never been there, it's a very horrible place that exists on the dark corners of the internet. There's a forum called Politically Incorrect, and it's full of freaks, schizos, the dregs of society. Also, a lot of INTJs frequent that board, predominantly INTJs and probably INTP types. There's been board polls. So I sometimes frequent 4chan because if you can sift through all the BS, you can gain some insight into what's going on in the culture. You have to be able to sift through a lot of propaganda and a lot of crap, but sometimes you can find some good stuff there. So there was all these threads on this forum. They were called happening threads, and it's when people begin to post footage. They started to post footage out of what was happening in Wuhan. There would be these Chinese people like collapsing on the street. The government would be taking bulldozers and literally paving over roads with dirt so that people couldn't escape, and they were bolting people into their homes. Now, I didn't know when I first started seeing this stuff if this was 100% true. Like anything on 4chan, you have to take it with a grain of salt. There's a lot of different disinformation. People could be pulling videos from some other event and saying it's from this or that. But, the more I started to look into the China situation, I started to realize, like, no, this is really like a pretty big deal. And it also coincided around the time of the Chinese New Year, where a lot of Chinese leave, most of the country leaves to go travel and stuff. That's like a tradition there, right? So they're around, they're in and out of various countries, Europe, flying all over the world. And it was just obvious this was going to catch on in, pretty much the entire world. So I did some research on it, and I became quite alarmed very early. I remember kind of going into, I think it was a Lowe's. Yeah, it was a Lowe's, and kind of at night, right before close, I probably looked kind of disheveled. But anyways, I found all the masks, and I just bought a bunch of masks, and there was a lot. They were pretty much fully in stock then. And before you say I'm like an asshole for hoarding masks, like, I mean, how was I supposed to know that the government didn't have stockpiles of this or hospitals didn't have extra? I was just thinking, well, I know there's going to be a run on these things, and I need to get some so that if this thing's really bad, then I at least be like protected in the meantime, right? So I got like 10. I got some N95s and some P100 masks. And I bought some Tyvek suits and some like latex gloves and some goggles too to keep it out of my eyes. And as I was checking out, the guy working the cashier's like curiously like looking at me, and I don't know why he asked me, but he's like, "So what's all this for?" I should have told him like, making meth, man, like, well, why do you care? But no, I was just like, oh, that virus in China, just in case it gets out of hand. And he didn't say anything back. He just went along like scanning my stuff. So that's kind of weird that he didn't have anything to say. Maybe he had never heard of it, or he just thought I was some weirdo. But then in retrospect, I wish I would have told him that just to fuck with him. Just been like, listen, I shouldn't tell you this, but this virus in China, it's gonna get really bad, man. I think you should start taking some precautions. I have some inside sources at the CDC. I should have told him that just to bust his balls. And hey, it would have been right. But see, people always think I'm a cop. I've had multiple people ask me if I'm a police officer or something. There's something, I guess it's with my kind of deadpan demeanor and sort of bluntness and whatever. He may have believed me. I don't look like a guy that really fucks around, so that would be the best way to prank someone, I guess. So that might be his first moment of hearing about the virus. So I want you to think, where were you when you first heard about this? Because I remember in 9/11, or on 9/11 when that happened, I know where I was, and I think you're going to kind of remember the first time you heard about this virus, most likely, and what your initial assumptions were. Because this is like a slow boil. It was like people heard about this for a long time before they acted on it. And it really wasn't until the government moved on it, and our government was colossally slow at moving on this. And the information, they would slowly like ramp it up, like, oh, this is no big deal, this is just a flu, to, oh, this is just going to be a shutdown for a small amount of time, to, the WHO was telling everyone, and the Surgeon General of the United States was saying, don't buy face masks, they don't work. If you wear them, they're more harm than good, because you'll be adjusting your face mask and getting it in your eyes and mouth. That's just like blatant propaganda. Basically, when they started issuing those statements out like a month and a half ago, it's because they didn't want people hoarding them, because they probably realized then that the medical staff was going to run out of these. So they lied. They basically blatantly lied to you. Now they're telling everyone that in order to leave the house, you should have a mask, and that was all common knowledge, like, until they started their disinformation. So you're going to have to use your own brain here. Don't listen to the government. If by the time the government reaches a conclusion, it's already like a known fact that you should have known about like 2 weeks ago. They're way behind the curve. So, like, my life is fine. Like, it's really, nothing's changed. I already work from home. I have a newborn, so I'm not leaving the house anyway. So really nothing has changed. It's in some ways it's actually nicer, because now my wife's home as well and she can work from home. But this thing could get really bad. Not so much the disease, which is it's really not that dangerous, but it's dangerous when the whole world is getting something that's highly contagious, and it's dangerous because it puts such a strain on the medical infrastructure that wasn't built for this. It's not so much dangerous that it has a super high mortality rate. I would be frightened if I was in my 50s. I'd be very scared if I was in my 70s and 80s. But if you were like 30s, healthy, your probability of death is quite low, as you know, but that doesn't mean you want to be a carrier of this thing. The real thing that we need to worry about at this point is the economic devastation. Now, economics is not just about like the straight line and turning that number green and watching the S&P 500 grow year after year for 10 years straight, and your Roth IRA. It's the economy is more than just a number on a screen. It's people's livelihoods. It's everything. It's sort of a misguided thing when people are saying that Trump is putting the economy above the lives of people. Like, there is a balancing act that you actually have to do. It's very nuanced, because if we spiral into like a global depression, like, there will be more lives lost to that than there will be to this this strain of coronavirus. But you can't just send everyone back to work, even if you were to just tell like the boomers to stay home, and then the young people will go out and work. That wouldn't work either, because there's enough young people going to the hospital. We would still probably override the medical system. If we didn't do anything, like, there's models saying a couple million people could die in the United States. It's probably even worse in other countries. So now they're kind of trotting out more realistic model scenarios of 1 to 200K dead, which in the grand scheme of things is actually probably going to be less deaths than what would have happened if the coronavirus didn't exist. And that's because no one's leaving the house. So very few people are dying in automobile accidents and other things that would have killed them otherwise. But that's not to shrug this off and to say that this is nothing. Like, clearly we needed a quarantine of some sort. I highly doubt that our quarantine's even that effective, just because people are stupid. You literally can't trust people to stay in their house and not gather in groups and stuff. People just won't listen to you. China, the reason, even though they're lying about all their numbers and infections and stuff like that, the reason they were quasi-successful, at least more so than the United States, is because they're authoritarian and they were able to, disregard human rights for a single cause. We can't even get like our states to agree on anything, and the lockdowns are basically a joke. So this thing should go on probably longer than most people are anticipating. Now, yeah, I did get my masks, and I I've already been a bit of a survivalist prepper over the past few years, so I have food stores and weapons and ammunition and all kinds of things to sustain myself. In some ways, I feel somewhat vindicated because people who are close to me probably think I have something wrong with me, or I'm some kind of paranoid freak, because I do sort of prep for contingencies and risk. I'm not like a crazy person about it, but I've known like events like this were just eventually going to happen. It makes sense to have a food stockpile and preparations for if the supply chain gets messed up. So in some ways I feel vindicated, but it's like, what are you going to do? Brag about being the guy, the Chicken Little that, knew the end of the world was coming, and then he gets to say, "I told you so," is like everyone around him's dying and there's death and destruction. Like, no, there's no celebration in being right. And it's not like I even financially capitalized on it. Like, I left my money in the stock market because I've been trained that buy and hold is the way to go, and that the market was efficient enough that it kind of knew it had these prices kind of baked into it. But no, we were at all-time highs when Wuhan was getting like hammered with this, and really there's people that have made a ton of money just exiting the market who are going to be able to like lump sum near the bottom of this thing. So I'm a little saddened that I didn't have the foresight to act, in an economic way, but at least, I feel somewhat prepared in a physical sense for this sort of thing. So, now, the other weird thing about the way the virus sort of embeds itself in your brain in terms of the way that we think now is with the social distancing measures is now I see human beings as disease vectors. They're potentially carrying some kind of pathogen that could kill me, and other people are viewing me as that type of person. And the longer this drags on, that's going to be kind of embedded in our collective psyches. I wouldn't be surprised if a small percentage of the population became germaphobes after this was all over, because this sort of psychic trauma would be too great. Kind of like old people that lived through the Great Depression became hoarders of things due to the psychological devastation. In some ways, our society is very soft. We've never experienced any form of hardship, really. Like, life is pretty easy. You have your Netflix, you have an endless sea of distractions. We've had relative economic stability and medical advances that prolong our life and minimize pain and suffering for all kinds of ailments. And all this has kind of culminated into like peak consumerism and sort of a degeneracy, for lack of a better word. Like, we seem like a spoiled, hedonistic society. So some people are already whining about having to be in quarantine and saying that it's so tough on them. Now, I can see in some cases it being difficult on people that live in cramped apartments and have to be surrounded by their families who maybe they dislike, which it's kind of sad if you dislike your family, your wife, or your kids or something. But we know there's a lot of people out there like that, and now they're all crammed together like sardines in their small New York apartment or something, screaming and yelling at each other. There's spoiled college kids who want to go out and party and they can't. And there's also people that have built sort of their identity on going to work or boys' night at the pub or whatever. And all that kind of comes slashing down, or crashing down rather. So they're just left, just them in their box, their house, their apartment or whatever, alone with their thoughts. And yeah, there's still an endless sea of distraction on the internet, but you have more time to think, especially if you're one of the people that got laid off or something like that. And economically, yeah, it's going to be hard for a lot of people, and I sympathize. I sympathize with the low IQ worker, the 90 to below IQ range. These people are basically never going to do any kind of meaningful work in their life. They can't mentally. They don't have the brain power to do much. So they're always going to be working like menial jobs like fast food, janitorial work and stuff like that, and through no fault of their own. They could be perfectly hardworking, non-lazy, great people, and they could even save money, but they'll never be able to save enough. I mean, they will be getting some help from the government and stuff like that, but those people I feel bad for. I don't feel bad for the white-collar worker who just squandered his paycheck on flat-screen TVs, car payments, and booze and stuff like that. I don't feel sorry for those people that don't plan for that don't plan far ahead. That's one problem with our debt-based consumer society, is that we haven't had any shakeups like this in a while, so people have gotten a little too comfortable. It's kind of sad, if you're making decent money, that if the world shuts down for even 4 months, you should still have a safety net, unless you're very underpaid. But you could have got a better job. So, I'm kind of a mix between the old like conservative pull yourself up from your bootstraps mentality and the kind-hearted liberal mentality that sees circumstances as mattering. I would say that liberals, for the most part, feel sorry for everyone who's not rich, but I feel like you need to look at the individual cases on whether they deserve your pity or not. And most people don't deserve my pity. I'm sorry. They've screwed up not just once, but through their entire life. Having long scale time preference is just huge for success in life. And I think there's definitely a causal relationship to IQ, but it's not everything. There's plenty of high IQ people that just don't have any money or any prospects because they're just lazy and they didn't plan ahead. So I only really feel sorry for the dumb people who work menial jobs who can't do any better. I don't feel sorry for your average just suburbanite drone who doesn't know what to do if the world shuts down for 4 weeks. Well, maybe you shouldn't have bought that boat that sits in your driveway, that you never take out in the lake, maybe about twice a year. There's people in my neighborhood with campers the size of their house, like multiple people, and it's always just parked in their driveway. These things cost well over $100,000. They're literally the size of 2 school buses, and they never take it out. And what's the point of camping if you're going to fucking sit in this thing the size of a submarine? I've seen those campsites too, right? Those RV parks. There's one tree in the parking lot, and they all sit on lawn chairs out in front of their RV. I could see it being a social thing or something, but that's not camping. Camping should be about getting away from the excesses of modernity, not bringing modernity with you with a house on wheels. That's just silly nonsense. And that's just this is kind of the reset that we need in some cases. But I feel bad for small businesses. My wife's work just laid off, I think, about half of their workforce today, and I don't know if they'll ever come back. And I feel bad for the small business, particularly the owner, who has put a lot of his life's work and life's energy into his business and could potentially fail if this thing gets a lot worse. I don't expect in this guy's case that his business will fail, but many will. The thing about small businesses that people don't understand, and I didn't even really know, so I talked to my wife about it, but yeah, they'd only keep about 30 days worth of operating expenses. Small businesses are meant to continually have work and the money coming in. It's unheard of to not have any money coming in. So multiply this by tens of thousands of small businesses across the United States. They might get some loans, but they're not going to get the big corporate bailouts. So the stimulus bill is mostly favoring big businesses, and it's giving individuals a small amount of spending money, but not much. It's mostly a big business stimulus. But I don't know enough about it to completely critique it. What I will critique is the injection of trillions of dollars into the economy, which will probably cause inflation. So this isn't investment advice, but if you had some disposable income and you didn't want to inject it into stocks, a month or two from now, then you should probably buy a little bit of Bitcoin. That has a lot of room to go. And you could obviously go the standard route and get gold, but Bitcoin has such a small market cap in relation to gold. And if it does actually catch on as a hedge, because people are like, oh, Bitcoin went down, the stock market went down. Bitcoin went down because of the liquidity crisis that just happened. People wanted to free up cash, and they're all going into the USD right now. But when this is kind of ending now and the stimulus is taking effect and there's more dollars circulating, you're going to probably see some inflation, and it's the time to position yourself in Bitcoin would be appropriate. I mean, it might drop down to 3,000, which you should buy a bunch, but it's still a good price. Again, this is not financial advice, just my opinion. So yeah, we're talking about human weakness. Another thing that's kind of tilting me is this hate on landlords. People think that landlords are like these evil people, that you should mutiny. There should be a mutiny against the landlord. There's been petitions circulating even if you can afford your rent, you should sign this petition that no one's going to pay rent so that the people who can't afford their rent don't have to pay, and we're going to mutiny against this landlord and not pay and all this stuff. It's people think that landlords are just balling out of control rich that somehow just have these houses and they're just extorting you out of money. No, it's all, landlords don't really make a lot. I used to listen to Bigger Pockets podcast when I was thinking about getting into real estate, and a lot of times landlords only make about $100 per month per door, so per home or per apartment that they own. A lot of the reason that landlords make money is that they get money on the appreciation of the building over time, but they're really not making more than the cost of their mortgage in the grand scheme of things. So it's not like this get rich quick scheme. It's only it's a way to make money if you can deal with tenants, and if you know how to leverage correctly, where you don't have to put a lot down, you can make money. But if all of your tenants just don't pay you at once, you can go belly up. And that could be your life savings. You could have been a great landlord who always, cleaned the toilets or did the correct plumbing when a tenant started to bitch and moan about it. So yeah, I feel like people don't understand how markets work, and how they just want to hate on people that have more than them because they were smarter with their money or something. It's just silly. So there's a lot of finger pointing and class warfare being waged with this. Everyone wants to get a free lunch out of it, and you should always have a safety nest egg. That's the bottom line. You shouldn't be within 2 months of being homeless. If you were that and you're a grown adult, you did something severely wrong, or maybe you had a medical illness problem, a medical problem which cost you a lot of money. There are certain instances, obviously, where it wasn't your fault, but by and large, people who are irresponsible are just gluttonous, overconsumptive, small-minded imbeciles. I don't know how to say it any more blunt, but it needs to be said. So let's see. I made a little list of topics that I wanted to cover. We've gone through most of them. The election in 2020, we could talk about that a little bit, and Trump's performance. Trump's handled this crisis about as bad as possible. He was a just the flu bro. He was bragging about how the numbers looked like, I don't know, a month and a half, 2 months ago. It was like, there's only 6 cases in the U.S. We've done a great job. It's like, man, first off, they're not testing. They weren't then anyway. They are now. So if there's 6 cases, there's probably more like 600 cases, asymptomatic cases. There's cases that people didn't go to the hospital. Even if you wanted to test, a lot of times you'd show up, they wouldn't be able to test you. So yeah, when there's 6 cases, there's more, and that's just spreading. It's percolating. It's going to happen. And the whole time I'm hearing him say this, I was like, he can't lie about this, because if he lies about this, everyone's going to know, because this is going to happen. So either he's really dumb and didn't understand how probability and exponential increases work, or he was misinformed by his advisors, because he's surrounded himself by a bunch of yes men and whatever else, or he's lying, and I don't quite know. And I don't think Trump's an idiot. People think he's an idiot because he has a very strange speaking style. He doesn't come across as intelligent or like a deep person, but I think that he's actually very smart, because a lot of these intellectual people, they're well read, they have the correct, politically correct opinions and stuff like that, and they're well spoken. They've never dealt with people who are more of quick-witted intelligence or street smart. There's plenty of street smart people that are very high IQ that you wouldn't know because they're not academically oriented. And that's Trump. I mean, if I had to range his IQ, not that it really matters, I'd definitely say he's over 120. He's probably upper 120s, 130 range. He's a smart guy. But I think that he doesn't evaluate risk correctly or something. I don't know. The flu bros are the people that trot out statistics. They don't think in future probabilistic and exponential fashion. So they'll be like, well, there's only 6 U.S. deaths. The flu kills X amount per year. It's yeah, right now, but don't you understand? This thing's percolating right now. It's incubating. There's asymptomatic spreaders going around. There's up to a 14-day incubation period. It might actually be more now. Usually it's 5 before you even start showing symptoms. This thing's going to blow up, and every week this thing's going to double, and it's going to spiral out of control. I don't know why people can't get that, but they're just the flu bros. So Trump was just the flu bro, and that's sad, and he deserves to lose the election because of this. Unless maybe he could redeem himself. I think that we were going to have this problem all along, because if you recall, he did shut the border down to China. That didn't do much because they came in from Europe, and they were already here, as I mentioned, traveling. So it really didn't do anything. It might have slowed the spread by a couple of days, a couple of weeks at most. It really didn't do anything. But when he did that, he got criticized by the left-wing media as being xenophobic, and oh my God, so there's really nothing that he could have done. If he took really drastic measures earlier, they would have said he was Hitler and that he was a fascist and he was going to shut down the country and all this. So really it's a no-win situation for Trump. But his takes have been consistently bad. He doesn't have consistent messaging. He's confusing a lot of people, because one week he'll be like, we might go back to work. The next day he comes in, he's like, we might quarantine New York. He's just all over the place. I don't know if he's just testing ideas out to see what sticks, but I don't think he's playing 4D chess here. I think that really he's not a strategic mind. He does run tactics, and he goes by his gut a lot. And since he is pretty high IQ, it sort of works, but we need a galaxy brain. We really need 150 IQ guys to just come in here and just fucking model everything. And we need Trump to just sit down. We don't need a carnival barker to run the show. We don't need a New York City deal maker to decide the fate of Western civilization. So he sort of deserves to lose. And I'm not an anti-Trumper guy. I actually like Trump. I actually like some of his policies. I don't think he's really made good on any of his promises. I don't think Trump's a racist or like a terrible person. I think he's a narcissist with personality defects. But I think like nationalism isn't a terrible policy, because if you look at China, we're heavily reliant on them for all our medical supplies. And if we piss off China too much, they might say, you know what, we're not going to send all that stuff that you guys are requesting to the U.S., all this medical stuff that we make. So we're heavily reliant on them. We've outsourced all our low-wage, low-IQ jobs to China. And he's right. Like, we got screwed, and there's absolutely no reason for us to have, unlimited immigration into the United States from low-skilled, non-English speaking workers. Like, I'm sorry, that's just retarded. Like, I'm fine with some immigration, but you can't just have an amnesty policy where whoever wants to come here can have a kid here, and then they get to absorb all the, tax dollars that we have paid into a system. That's not a functioning government. And the reason that the left wants that kind of stuff is they want to shift the demographics a bit. They want to shift the demographics to the left. So, yeah, I mean, Trump, I agree with some of his politics, but I don't think he's like a real great president. In terms of Biden, like, Biden is going to win the nomination over Sanders unless it goes to convention. In which case, there was some kind of theory that Cuomo, or the governor from New York, could somehow step in, because he's making, like, everyone's impressed with how he's handling the situation in New York. At least he seems to be, like, really loving the media attention that he's getting, and he's doing actually quite well, and that's what we want from a leader in a crisis situation. So he's positioning himself well for a presidential run, maybe in 2024, and possibly this year if there's some kind of brokered convention. I'm not quite sure how it all works, but so Biden is actually, I think he's mentally unfit. He's had a series of gaffes that get swept under the rug typically on the left-wing media, but the right-wing media trots it out every time he has like a senior moment. And there's something wrong with him, and it's possible that whoever his vice president pick is, he says it's going to be a woman, so maybe Kamala Harris or something will actually be the president when they deem him unfit to run. Or it's possible that he'll lose if he has a large public gaffe on like a debate with Trump or something, where he just like forgets where he is and starts spouting like sentences in the wrong order, which is what he's been doing on the television. But that should be interesting. I mean, right now 50% of Americans approve of Trump's job handling this crisis, which I think's absolutely crazy. So the American public will believe about anything. I don't know. So I guess that's all I'm going to rant about. I know it's kind of a somber tone. Don't really have much else to add. That's just my take on the present situation. And I don't know how this is going to play out. I would hope that we're able to like go back to work and get moving in the summer here, at least in some regions. But I don't know. Like, pretty much the world has caught up to... Felt like I was ahead of the curve for a while, but that curve slowly collapsed as people began to wake up to the surrounding situation. And right now, I guess my only advice is to, if you have spare money, you have a good opportunity to buy stocks at a discount. I don't know when the time to buy is. I think we're going to go much lower. We could also have a good opportunity to buy Bitcoin before we hit inflation, possibly. Not investment advice, I don't know. you also have the opportunity in quarantine to get a lot of stuff done. Now, I actually been working longer hours in quarantine than I had before, so I'm not really getting any of my personal projects done. But um, if you have free time, make use of it. You may never have this free time again. So just say hi in the comments if you like the video. It's possible I'll start making more videos in the future. They'll be informal like this, and I'll just do stuff occasionally. I had a large and ambitious project in the works a couple of years ago where I had a website semi-constructed, articles written, and it was a self-improvement website, and I was going to really put my all into it, but I just didn't feel like I had the time to do it, so I put it on the back burner, and now it'll probably never come out. But I always intended to come back, and I just never did. I removed all of the old videos that I had posted under INTJ Ryan because I kind of grew out of the Myers-Briggs personality theory. I was sort of embarrassed by some of the videos. Even though people liked them, I don't know, I'm kind of perfectionist, so I like to kind of like burn everything I ever did in the past. And I mean, I still have the videos. I just made them invisible, so you can't get to them. So that's what happened with those videos. But I have, over the past 5 years, I think learned a lot about a lot of different things. Like I feel much more confident in presenting all kinds of material to people. I feel I've grown a lot, and I've changed in some ways for sure. So definitely have a lot more to talk about of a variety of topics. So maybe I'll release videos, but I'm not going to promise anything. Right now, I just felt like I should get a message out there and see how everyone's doing. So thanks for watching.